We're indoors today for one very important reason. Obviously, anywhere where tinies live is always heated to beyond the temperature of a furnace. And that's important because for today's project, we need heat. Today's project is the restoration of this, I'd say early 90s, Selle Italia Flite saddle. Now these things were industry standard on any superbikes of the 90s. There was nothing else like it at the time, with the cutaway to show off the titanium rails and the weight under 200 grams. This one's clearly in a very ragged state. In fact, it was donated to me by a fellow gentleman collector who thought it was beyond repair, but I'm about to prove this fool wrong. Now it actually looks like he's butchered it deliberately just to make my life difficult. Thanks for that. Somebody has clearly tried to peel off the leather. Now, I was thinking, do I peel off the leather completely and re-skin it in something lovely like a neon coloured Alcantara? Or do I try and restore the existing leather? And I think I'm going to go with the latter because I think it's salvageable. For one reason, although it's scuffed all over, there's no actual holes in it. And for the second reason, it's already stuck down quite nicely on top. It's just around the edges where it needs some re-gluing. Now, the first job, of course, is to clean it. Hence, of course, the need for heat, because to keep the leather soft and malleable, it needs to be kept quite hot. If it's out in my cold workshop, then it's going to shrink and shrivel, and then we'll never be able to stick it back down. A few other considerations. Well, firstly, the rails being titanium means there's no corrosion, so they'll polish up very easily. The shell being plastic, again, we'll just take a scrub. Cleaning the leather, I think we'll use saddle soap to begin with, and then the actual gluing process, I'm going to copy one of old Shovel's earlier videos where he used two different types of glue just to stick down around the edges. I might cheat with a staple gun where the shell is thick enough, and then use clips, spring clamps they're called, to hold the thing in place. Now that won't be easy because the gap between the shell and the rails in some places is less than 1 millimetre, so to get a spring clamp in there might be difficult. And then of course, once it's completely recovered, I then need to restore the finish on the leather, probably just using my boot polish kit, and think about, do I want to preserve the original graphics? Given how shredded they already are, in fact beyond repair in some places, I think I'm not going to be too fussy about the graphics. I might just blacken the whole thing. If the graphics are still visible, then fine, but if we lose them, I'm not too worried. But what I do think we're going to end up with is a lovely shiny black Flite, which can go on a build which I have planned. Right, 3 more ingredients for this cleanup. As well as an unbearably hot house, we need a stiff brush, some spray-on saddle soap, and finally water that's almost too hot to handle. The whole point of this is to keep the leather soft and malleable and not shrink it while keeping it clean. Well, stage 1's been a complete success. The saddle soap and hot water technique has actually softened up the edges beautifully. Of course, the problem that we now face is when this dries, will it shrink and shrivel again and be really hard to work with? Because of course you can't glue it while it's wet. I guess there's only one way to find out, but one thing's for sure, I'm going to be keeping it as heated as possible as it dries. But I suppose, again, not too hot, because won't that shrivel it up even more? I don't know, we're going to find out. So do I just lean it up against this incandescent radiator and let it dry artificially? I'm thinking probably not. I'm thinking I just sort of let it dry very slowly at room temperature, because it is a concern that as it dries, it's just going to sort of shrivel and shrink back and this leather's going to go really stiff again. And of course, the big problem we've got is all the leather stretching and softening products that you can buy, of course, contain oils. And if I was to oil this leather, then it's never going to stick down with glue. So that's the next challenge. Right, I've got my sticking kit here. Big spring clamps, little spring clamps, specialist leather glue, and super glue for the edges. Now, as I suspected, as this has dried, and it is now completely dry, the leather has gone hard and shrunk back. So what I think we need to do now to get it malleable enough to glue it down is take the hairdryer to it. Now this part's really going to be painstaking and indeed painful. because it's a full 10 minutes between putting this glue on and actually being able to stick it down. And I'm an impatient man, as you will have seen in my painting video recently. I get bored of this sort of thing. So this is going to be a salutary lesson for me. All right, fast forward, and there's the hedgehog. Every single sprung clamp being utilised, and every last bit that I could possibly clamp has been stuck down. So we're just going to leave this now. This is where I have to learn to be patient. And then whatever I suppose hasn't stuck down, that's where the super glue comes in as the next stage. Well, it's been 24 hours, so let's get these clips off and see what we're looking like. I am not unhappy with that. Yes, it still looks rough, but it's completely stuck down all the way around. In fact, I would go so far as to say delighted. What's even more encouraging is that was the last of the unknown stages. Obviously gluing down the edges is something I'd never tried before and I wasn't sure how it would work. But restoring all these bits is something I've done so many times before that I know I can do it again. So I'm now 100% confident that this is going to be very beautiful very soon. Now for the final cleanup, you can buy all sorts of restoration kits and scuff removers, but to be honest, every gentleman spy, officer and rotter should be more than familiar with how to operate this stuff. A good old-fashioned shoe cleaning kit. All right, a lot of shining and polishing later, and I'm really happy with that. It still looks suitably vintage. It is, after all, nearly 30 years old. So, well, 26 years old according to the maker's plate underneath, which is the perfect vintage for the bike that it's intended for. Obviously, if you want to see this going onto the bike with a load of other high-end restored luxury parts, then you have to subscribe, you have to smash that bell, as the kids are saying. And it won't be long because I intend to start tackling that build within the next week. But for now, this is just a short video, and just to demonstrate that you can take a very ragged saddle and make it rather lovely. The only final thing, which I can't do anything about right now, is these indentations where the clamps have been. Obviously I only took the clamps off an hour or so ago. I'm prepared to bet that after a few hours, and certainly after a bit of use and softening up, these indentations will disappear. They're certainly not glued down. And then apart from the graphics being a bit worn, this looks fantastic.